Hello and welcome back to Films on High. This is Decca,
This is Alex.
and today the film that we're going to review is Rocky. Coming out in 1976, directed by John G. Avildsen. This is starring Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shire, Burnt Young, Carl Weathers, and Burgess Meredith. Rocky Balboa is an amateur boxer, not much going on into his life until one day he gets a match against the world heavyweight champion, Apollo Creed. What'd you think about the film?
Well, it's definitely illuminating to watch this film because I've never really been a big fan of the Rocky franchise. Never really sat down and watched them, maybe caught like some of them here and there on TV or whatever, but I just never really had the urge to go back and watch like the Rocky franchise. I was never like a big boxing fan or a big enough Stallone fan, but I was certainly aware of it as like, a series and it was pretty big. So you go back and you watch this film kind of knowing how big this franchise has come. It's kind of like a quaint little movie in its own way. Like the movie has a humility to it that sort of matches the theme of the story of, this humble kind of small-time fighter getting this big opportunity. And of course, at the time, Stallone was a struggling actor who was kind of forced to take some jobs, that were maybe a little unsavory, and he was having trouble really making it in the industry. So this was kind of a last-ditch attempt for him to, really write a movie and also get the chance to star in it, because even being able to star in it was a difficult proposition, too. Like, at first, they just wanted to buy the script from him, and they figured we'll cast someone more, experienced, more bankable. But he pushed through and he made it work. And the movie, you watch it now, there's definitely some parts of it that feel like somewhat dated and like maybe a little corny, but you can see the why it became such a big hit. Like it is kind of this small, it has almost like an independent movie thing going on, like small cast, not too much going on, like for like a movie that for a series that is so much about boxing and fighting, like this movie is really doesn't have that much like boxing or fighting in it. Like it's really more about character moments and about this guy as a person, which is sort of refreshing, more of a character piece. Like there are maybe some aspects of it that are a little, weird or uncomfortable, especially like in today's context, but it's still like for a movie that ended up becoming such an iconic sort of film that led to this big series that sort of became more over the top. This movie has like a surprisingly kind of low stakes and sort of deep character feel to it in a way. Like when I mean low stakes, I don't mean like, obviously it's about this guy pursuing his big dream, but it's not necessarily like a movie about the end of the world or, like it's not about, it's just a simple story of like one man trying to achieve his sort of dream. And it has like, there's like a kind of a directness and like a lack of pretension to it that maybe makes it a bit endearing as well. So it holds up pretty well. Like I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting it to be like this.
Watching it in today's age with the perspective that I've gotten so far, this movie hits me on two fronts. On one, I still love the movie. It's something that I grew up with. It's an endearing movie, just as you said, with this nostalgic view, and as well as just the small town fighter getting a chance at the big leagues. It's something that in any type of career or type of form you always kind of dreamed of the next step, and he gets it right. And where it hits me on the second front, it's more getting to watch those uncomfortable scenes. It kind of puts into question the entire movie in a sense, because when I was a kid watching Rocky, all I thought about was, the boxing scenes and, him screaming, Adrian! But now getting to actually rewatch the entire film after so many years, I'm watching the character and I'm like, okay. For one, as you mentioned, the boxing itself takes a kind of a back step and we're doing more of a character study, but something you mentioned while we were watching the film is that it does feel unresolved. So, where characters would have these progressions and these character arcs in a sense, they don't really get resolved because that's not what's the point of the film. It's the point is this guy training to become a boxer, but I just feel that there were some places where it was incomplete.
Well, yeah, that's kind of a good point. Like, it maybe opens up certain character arcs that aren't necessarily satisfied, like resolved in a wholly satisfying way, because yeah, like at the end of the day, it is a portrait of this guy Rocky. Obviously, it's right there in the title, but the movie, there's the little world he inhabits, like the gym he works out at, and the character Mickey, who ends up becoming his coach, who at first his trainer, who at first sort of looks down on him, but begrudgingly starts to respect him. And there's his friend Paulie and Paulie's sister Adrian, who he interacts with very significantly, because Adrian sort of becomes his love interest over the course of the story. And like, yeah, the movie, on top of being like I keep saying wrestling, what the fuck's wrong with me? On top of being like a boxing story, it's also trying to be like a human sort of story, where it's almost trying to tell this story about like average people living these, sort of normal lives where they're maybe feeling unfulfilled. Like, we see Rocky pursuing this romance with this woman, Adrian, who is really sort of shy and withdrawn, and he's sort of trying to bring her out of his shell, and like out of her shell, and like that's a typical sort of thing we see in movies, like, but you sort of wonder what the attraction between them necessarily is. Like, why is Rocky so attracted to her? And like, their relationship sort of ends up being the emotional undercurrent of the film. But you do there are moments where it feels like there's a bit of a lack of chemistry. And like, again, it's painted like you sort of get what they're going for, with Rocky sort of trying to bring her out of, he's trying to, communicate with her and get her to open up a little, but when he takes her out on dates, he's kind of like pushy, and he just talks about himself endlessly. Like, he comes across as a guy that sort of lacks game, or, in regards to women, but maybe that's kind of the point too. He's supposed to be this kind of, sort of unsophisticated guy. He's, a dude who, he's a loan shark, and, he fights people. He's a boxer, so he's not exactly like fucking Romeo over here. So you get this kind of portrayal of like normal, flawed people trying to form this relationship. And there's also the other thing with Paulie being kind of like an asshole in his own way. He's like a drunk and clearly has issues in his own life, and he takes that out on Adrian. And yeah, they sort of build up this thing where like through her relationship with Rocky, Adrian becomes more confident in herself, and she's able to kind of stand up to Paulie, and like, that's good stuff. But again, it feels like the movie doesn't quite go deep enough with it. Like, maybe in the sequels they explore that more, but like, yeah, you do have like a pretty good, strong human story built in here, in spite of like, it's weird because, like, again, a lot of it probably has to do with how Rocky has changed over the years, becoming this franchise and becoming this kind of wider thing. But when you kind of just look beyond, like, the kind of cliched, like, underdog, like, follow your dreams kind of story, there is, like, more depth and more meat to it than you would see typically in a movie like this. Like, Stallone, as a writer, he was able to imbue these characters with, like, just enough to rise them above the level of cliche. And obviously, like, it's it was a pretty small movie. Like, I don't think a lot of people believed in it. It only had like $1 million budget, which really isn't that much for a movie like this. It ended up becoming a huge hit, so like there's enough there to really kind of make it work just as a film. Like, because you almost think about Rocky, again, you think mostly about like boxing and the kind of, the yo Adrian bullshit, the kind of cliches like you said. But when you go back and you revisit this film especially, like, yeah, there is more humanity to it and more personality than you would expect. Like, again, maybe some of the content or some of the behavior or the things that Rocky says and does haven't necessarily aged as well as they could have, but you just put that down to typical 70s shit. Like, it almost reminds me of, like, one of those, it almost reminds me of like a Mike Leigh movie in some ways, like a British kitchen sink drama about like just normal people, like, living kind of these kind of poor underclass lives and struggling with their own dreams and ambitions. Like, it's interesting because, again, like, I keep referring to how the movies change, but Rocky became this more symbol of, like, America. Like, this movie has a much more, like, almost quiet approach to it, which I like. Like, even that big iconic Rocky theme that everyone remembers, it's only really used at one point in the film, like at the very end when he's doing his big, like, victorious training montage. Yeah, but for most of the movie there's not even that much music. Like, a lot of scenes are just played quietly or with just like a little piano in the background. Like, there's a good feel to it. And again, like, you get, when you see like how the Rocky series sort of changed and became something different, it's almost refreshing to just see the movie being so like down to earth. Yeah.
And that's where it gets great for the film, because for one, great pacing, because not all scenes, of course, some scenes could be taken out, but everything has its place. It flows well. You get to see the progression with the characters, but also as it makes sense as how the story is. This guy, he's in his 30s, he's a loan shark. He wants, just to even train at the boxing ring, but he gets kicked out by the trainer, saying that you could have had a shot back in the day, but you became a two-bit, loan shark type of thing. So you could tell that, yeah, this guy's pretty much at the end of the ropes type of thing. He doesn't know what to do, and getting a shot like this from a guy who's just looking for publicity, all the movie leads up to that last boxing match that you get to see between the two. And you get to see the first time that he gets a real good swing onto him, and then that's when it's just like him, the entire crowd, and everybody is just like, oh, okay, so this guy is actually pretty good. And then it keeps lasting, and the guy said, announced the entire world, at least for the boxing world, 3 rounds, and this guy is out. They got to go to the 15th round, and both of them didn't go down, and they said there won't be no rematch. And then you get to get the franchise from there, of course. But it was just kind of cool just to kind of get that build-up of just, as you mentioned, the character development to build up to this, authentic boxing, well, semi-authentic boxing match of just these two guys, one coming from fame, just looking for publicity, and this one just, like, believing that he could actually just, go to distance, you could say.
Yeah, and it was based on a real story about this amateur boxer named Chuck Wepner who was given a shot to fight Muhammad Ali. So Stallone took that and turned it into this kind of, like a feel-good type of story about, one's dreams and personal ambitions. But again, he put enough, like, and he made it more, like I said, I appreciate that he tried to make it more of like a personal story or like a story about people. And, there are maybe a few weaknesses here and there. Like, the character of Apollo Creed is kind of, he's not very well defined. Like, a lot of it comes down to Carl Weathers' performance to bring the character to life. But, we see him a little bit, and then he just kind of pops up at the very end. And it sort of makes sense because there's no personal animosity between him and Rocky, really. It's mostly just about this match and, this... It's not about, like, these two have some kind of personal history together. Like, Apollo himself more just represents, the shot at the title. So that's not necessarily a problem, but, like, at the end, like, yeah, you have such a build-up of, like, character moments and stuff. The final boxing match maybe feels a little bit rushed and a little bit, like, it could have been shot maybe, in a way that was a bit more exciting. Like, apparently John G. Avildsen... John G. Avildsen was not really like a fan of boxing or boxing movies, but unlike Scorsese, who was able to really make boxing look dynamic in Raging Bull, the boxing in this movie is a bit more, but again, it works more from like the character perspective. And there's like the moment where he's like, "Oh, cut my eye open, it's all swollen." Like they do add some little like nasty moments in there to make it seem a bit more visceral. But again, it's very much more about the personal journey that Rocky goes through as a person. And they didn't go with like the standard cliche, which again is something I like, because like, yeah, you mentioned after this you can kind of see how it goes and the rest of the series happens, but it's not necessarily focused on his victory. Like at the end he's not even declared the winner, Creed is, but it's more about, he did it, he took his shot, and he has like the woman he loves and stuff like that. So it has like this kind of nice, humble, like ending to it, where it's not necessarily about like the glory or the riches or whatever, but more about like the respect and the self-respect and the love and appreciating those things, the things that really matter. So it's a nice little well-rounded film, and you can see why it made such an impression. There's some good acting here. Like Stallone does a pretty good job. This kind of set the tone for his whole acting career. Like this is something he never could really shake off, the whole Rocky thing, especially as it turned into a huge franchise. But just on the strength of this one film, like he does make it work. He makes Rocky kind of sweet and endearing enough that you want to root for him. Mm-hmm. Talia Shire does a good job as well. Like most people remember her as Connie from the Godfather movies. But in this movie, she gets a bit more room to shine and a bit more room to like grow. We see her actually sort of evolving this character as the movie goes along, whereas in the Godfather movie, she's a bit more overshadowed by everyone around her. So she does some pretty good acting too, like nice supporting work from Burt Young. He's always great playing Paulie. Joe Spinell, the kind of the great character actor who also did some great work in movies like Maniac, playing Gazzo, the loan shark that Rocky works for, and of course Burgess Meredith, who does like a great he became another one of the real iconic characters of the series. Even though he doesn't have that much screen time, he really makes a good impression. And Carl Weathers, so it's a good film, like good cast, good script, like. It definitely still holds up, I would say. Like, even now, after all the kind of insane hype and how ridiculous and over the top the series became after this, I think this film still has, like, a charm and a power to it.
No, exactly. And for something that came out in 76 and we're in 2025, it's very endearing. And I can see why it's an inspiration for a lot of fighters where, it's just, again, achieving your dream, never giving up. Even if you lose, at least he won something. And yeah, the whole point was that, he won himself a girl, he won himself the respect of his, talent type of thing. And then, of course it led to a franchise, but it's a franchise that basically makes sense to a certain point. And you're kind of like, okay, cool. And one more thing that I really like about this film is the city itself, how sometimes he interacts with the fellow people. He's one of the people type of thing, where Apollo Creed seems more of like, the celebrity type. So I kind of like that idea, just like him, as you mentioned, just the personality of people.
He's the blue collar Philadelphia guy. Yeah, he works in like the meat packing and like you see the kind of low class, like the low end of the social strata, which I like as well. And like I said, the movie has that surprisingly low frills quality to it, where you can tell they shot it on the cheap, and there's not too many really recognizable actors in there. They really had to. You could tell that they were working with like a fairly shoestring budget, and that adds to kind of the small, the kind of down to earth, humble quality that the film has, and how that relates to the overall story. So. It's still a pretty good film.
I would rate it 4 out of 5. That would be my rating for this film.
I'll give it a 4 out of 5. Just like a neat, there you go, like recognition of the film as like kind of an American classic in its own regard, and a good example of that kind of typical American underdog story. It still stands up pretty well. I would recommend it.
Definitely recommend this type of movie. It's a staple. It's something just to visit and revisit. So, what do you think about this film? Let us know down in the comments down below. But until then, this has been Film on High.
Peace.
Later. 4 out of 5. Yeah, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. That would be my rating for this film.